Welcome to the Raise podcast. I'm Carol Barwick. We're here to raise your confidence and inspire your creativity. Each episode, we will have a different guest who will be discussing our Raise word. The Raise word is a word that will encourage you or empower you and at times inspire you to explore the word a little more for yourself. Well, hello everybody and welcome to the Raise podcast. I'm Carol Barwick. We are often very busy in our lives, aren't we? And I know you've been busy listening to the podcasts. We've had some really interesting words, but today is a nice word to just calm down and be a bit restful as we look at the word stillness. And we're talking to writer and wellbeing coach Jacqui Taylor this morning. Jacqui, welcome.
Morning. Lovely to be here.
Morning. Before we go into all the different things that you do to promote stillness, what does the word stillness mean to you?
So I think of stillness in more of a dynamic way. It is about finding a point of calm, of balance, where there's an equilibrium, but it's not about being static or stuck or rigid. So it's sort of that fluid stillness where there's still activity going on, but it's just paused, and things can be going on and you can allow those things to go on, but we're in this sort of central, like the eye of the storm, we're in this central point where everything is calm and still for that moment, however long that moment is.
Interesting, thank you. What I loved was even as you were just about to start, I don't know if you noticed it, but you just took a little pause and suddenly everything just felt that little bit more still as you started to speak. I don't know if you've noticed that before. It'd be interesting if the listeners listened and noticed that. But yeah, it's, as you said, we often think of stillness as calm before the storm, but what I hear you saying is it's calmness within the storm.
Yes, I think that potentially is a reflection on perhaps how my life has been in the past and how sometimes it continues to be, because as much as we'd like to think we get to somewhere, life just continues to happen to us, doesn't it? So where I have tried to use stillness through my journey, particularly in the last few years, is to create that little oasis of calm in order to be able to cope with whatever it is that life is throwing at me, and also then to be able to enjoy wherever I am at that point in time, and this is actually within a day by day basis rather than finding this I'll rest when, I'll do this when I get there. It's very much about taking these little pockets during the day, to, and interspersing them within your day to create an overall effect of stillness, because our lives are so ridiculously busy, and mine is. I'm not saying I'm a very action-oriented person. I have a very busy mind, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I think one of the things for me why this feels so powerful is because when you are one thing and you can experience almost the polar opposite, it just feels so lovely to know that it doesn't always have to be frenetic.
To be honest with you, Jacqui, I think if you said we're going to talk about stillness and we're going to talk about just not doing as much and not being as busy, I think we just lose our listeners because it's just not realistic. We are often in the storm. There are storms everywhere. And so being able to find stillness within that storm is what everybody wants, I think. They don't want to hear, don't be busy, because we are busy and getting busier. And even if that busyness is just the normal life with nothing else on top. it's still our busyness. So to be able to find a stillness within that, I think is a real key that we, will be exciting to talk a little bit about. Just before we do look at how you're finding that stillness, could you tell me a little bit about your storms?
Yes. Okay. So I'll talk about the storm that brought me to be able to discover this in a way that I could use it, and then I might go back and talk about how I can see the difference. So we're in 2020, which obviously has significance for many people because of COVID. And at that time, I was running, and had been for many years, a physiotherapy clinic in my local town, and we were obviously significantly affected by the lockdown. So that was very stressful, and I went into complete survival mode, trying to rescue my business as we were losing money hand over fist, to the detriment of my family, to be fair, because this business was my baby. And I look back now and I'm quite ashamed really of how focused I was on that and how oblivious I was to what was going on for the rest of my family. But that was where I was, and I started doing some breath work then because of that. I was doing things with other local businesses, and the local yoga studio was running meditation things, and we were all trying to group together about how we could actually create some way of create community and things. So that was when I started sort of doing it. And as someone with a really busy mind, I'd really struggled with meditation in the past. And the breath work felt like a real window into it. But I'll pause on that, and I'm sure we're going to go into that in more detail. But back to the storm. So the storm's going along, and then it's kind of like, oh, okay, we're settling into where we were. And then in July 2020, I was diagnosed with lobular breast cancer.
Wow.
And that just pulled everything from underneath me, and a huge reset. And we talked about being in the eye of the storm. There was a moment where it was like everything was in mute, and I'm just there going, okay, this is the universe telling me that something has to change, because it's given me warnings before and I've chosen to ignore them and keep pushing on. So that was that storm that by then building up in my ability to cope with that and use the skills I already had. I also started writing then and journaling, which then went on to me writing and publishing a memoir. And now I write a lot, and I find the writing and the stillness and the meditation all come together to create this lovely place to go to get away from all the noise of the world, whilst also thinking deeply about the world. It's, and having a lot of awareness about it. And I came out of that, and we sort of felt like, oh yes, that's fine. And kids have changed schools, and there's just all the aftermath of COVID. And then, so when would I finish? I finished my treatment April 21. November 21, my youngest child came out as transgender. And whilst being incredibly indignant at the time that I was being subjected to some other drama, when I felt like I should have had a get out of jail free card, because I was like, oh, I thought I'd done my bit. It's that thing. Life needs to stop happening to me now. I've had cancer. I've come through it. Stop. So, and that's been another whole other journey, and we're in a really good place with that now. But again, the ability to cope with that and move through that, it would have been very different if I hadn't had that experience. So, a lot of it bases around in terms of how I chose to and went to approach having a cancer diagnosis. And if I reflect back on previous storms and the things that you have, I've got two kids. I mean, they're 20 and 17 now, but obviously, through life, they generate unintentionally lots of drama in our lives. But we also had quite a significant family event that happened that went on for many years, from 2011 to about 2015, with a close family member around mental health, which when I reflect back on how I dealt with that, and I did deal with it, there wasn't much stillness going on there. It was full on battle armor, fighting through, taking on the world. And I think that's been the biggest learning, is rather than battling finding stillness and quiet to be able to consider how you're going to respond to things has been the big learning. And as someone who has fortunately come through cancer and I'm currently well, those battle metaphors, you know, if you actually speak to most people who've had or have cancer, they don't like battle metaphors, because that feeling that you are fighting with yourself, I don't think is good for us. It's that feeling of, if you're fighting with yourself, your nervous system is never not in survival mode. And most of the people that I know, or people that I follow online who are in that or have been through it, don't like all those battle metaphors that we throw about things like cancer and surviving. And that's why sometimes I use the word rebel. I saw somebody else use that as a term, because we need to be more gentle with ourselves and not feel like we're fighting, because while we think we're fighting the rest of the world, we're actually creating an internal turmoil as well, that's really, really unhealthy for our bodies and our minds, and therefore as a result of that we project that out then to everybody else, and often end up hurting the people that we love the most.
Yeah, it's interesting looking and thinking about battle metaphors, because I often think about the word retreat, and the word retreat in a battle context is very much almost like surrender, go back, and yet retreating, you know, in a wellness sense is really important, and where you find your stillness and where you, as you said, find the space and the wisdom to respond. And I think there's a real is it dichotomy? I probably used that word wrong, but I think it is, of the fact that it in a battle sense, surrender is not going to help you, and yet taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture is usually always a wise way forward, and enables you to go back into the storm or whatever it is that you're facing, I think, with a different, it's reframing it, isn't it? I think.
Yes. It's interesting you say that, because my meditation teacher talks about surrender and there being two ways of thinking about it, and one where the white flag surrender, as you mentioned there, but also you can think of it surrendering to, bowing down to something, where you accept and you release and you sort of let go of resistance to, but in a positive frame. And when you say about retreat, I'd not ever thought about that in that way, but I think for me, one of the powerful things about finding stillness in really small pieces, sort of drop through the day, and there's research to support that this is really beneficial, because you get a huge cumulative effect of those small moments to pause, even if it's literally just, like you say, taking a breath before you speak, is that day to day, we are living day to day, that is our lives. And absolutely we need to be having something that, whether it's a dream, purpose, goal, whatever you want to call it, that you're moving towards, but that isn't where we're living in this moment, in this day, and how that day goes, rather than just being relieved that it's over or counting it down to the weekend, or that whole thing about hump Wednesdays and all of that. Everything's an effort and everything's a challenge. If we can find those moments in the day of stillness to just pause and breathe and just be in ourselves momentarily, it re-energizes us in a way that we can then be in the world and doing what we're doing and find joy in it. And I mean, I was awful at that. I was absolutely awful at it before. I was so busy running a business. I mean, I started my business when my youngest child was 5 months old. I had next to no maternity leave with either of them, because I was in the middle of my physiotherapy degree when I had my first child. So it was just like boom, 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 keep going, you know, trying to manage them, running, you know, childcare and doing things. There was no stillness. I was just, you know, just live from weekend to weekend, holiday to holiday. And it is a terrible cliche, isn't it, say about creating a life that you don't want to escape from. But is that not the point? It's, you know, it's fabulous to go and do things, but if you're living for something that's a point in the future all the time, that inevitably may not live up to those expectations. Sometimes they do, don't they? But then you still have to come back, and that's something that has sat with me for a long time. I mean, my first career, when I first went to university, I did an engineering degree and I went into corporate sales, and it was very glamorous. Well, say glamorous, well paid job, lots of funky things going on, cars and mobile phones before anybody else had mobile phones back in. It's like, oh my God, it's 30 years ago now. I don't even like to admit to that. And over time, the stress of that job meant I was literally living from holiday to holiday, and then crashing when I got home, when I went return to work. And that was the point where I remember thinking, I need to do something where I'm happy for the 48 weeks of the year when I'm not on holiday. Because otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
And there's a very distinct memory of a particular, what was an amazing trip, but the coming down off it afterwards was the thing that sort of toppled me. And then over the years, I've got it right, I've got it wrong, and I'm in a completely different stage in life now. Obviously, my children are much older. One of them's not here anymore. One of them's doing A-levels. I don't have that looking after bit to do, but they still need a lot of support. And I've sold my business, and I'm doing other things now. And I'm careful to craft my time to not just keep recreating the very things that I was trying to not to get away from, but just became very aware. I mean, COVID created that bubble, didn't it, for a lot of people. People use it different ways. Then having cancer on top of that, and I spent a lot of time on my own and with walking my dog. And there was a point when that was all I was allowed to do, because obviously I was shielding. I couldn't go anywhere else, which was great because someone else had to go to the supermarket. That was not a loss. But there was a lot of time, and the writing and writing my memoir led me to reflect on lots and lots of things about what was important and living each day. And when you said at the beginning about people not wanting to be told to be less busy or take things out of their life, I get that completely. It was one of my complete bugbears with certain members of my family who would always go, well, you do too much. That's why you get stressed. That's why. And I'm like, but I want to do things. And I still do things. I wrote a book in the middle of my chemo, for crying out loud. But we need to use, or the way I see it, is using resources available and things within ourselves to allow us to be that person that we want to be. It doesn't mean changing who you are. If you start meditating or doing breath work or writing, it doesn't change who you are. But by using certain skills to create some stillness, allows you to be who you are in a sustainable way. And not just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Some of it is about restraint. Some of it is about stopping on a daily basis, but not on a longer term piece. And being mindful about what we're busy with. We can be very busy with a lot of things that are adding very little value to our lives, can't we?
Yeah. As I said, I think, it's not about changing who you are. It's about becoming more of who you are, isn't it? And the best bits. A recent episode was on AI, and I've been a real AI ostrich and not wanting to know anything about it. But one of the things for me that have made me think a little bit differently is that our guest said that AI allowed us to be more human and do more of the things that we want to do. And that was an interesting thing for me. Something that's been coming up in my mind recently has been be more and worry less. And sorry, be more and do less. Because I think, again, a real cliche, the whole human being rather than a human doing. But it's that is life. And as I said, we are getting more and more busy. I wanted to just go back to the COVID days for a minute, because I think for a lot of people, that did really bring a stillness about that was really unexpected. You know, those wonderful Facebook posts about all I can hear are the birds singing. No traffic, no busyness in that sense. And yet for people like you and I mean, I'm just a totally creative being. And I was thinking about it just this morning. I can be lying down for ages because I have long COVID. I have a chronic illness, so I'm lying down a lot, and yet really not be still at all, because inside I'm creating, I'm thinking, I'm worrying, I'm doing, you know, and like you know, I'm trying to run a business and kind of keep it going and keep it doing what it needs to be doing. And for some women, anyone that runs their own business, there's very little stillness unless you learn how to create it. And I think that is the key, really. It's being able to create that stillness. I don't know about you, but I'm certainly feeling nice and still talking to Jacqui Taylor. If you're wanting a little bit of rest and peace and you time, our podcast is a lovely way to do that. We've got so many guests that are just wanting to increase your confidence and raise your creativity. So do keep listening and go back and listen to your favourite episodes again. And of course, share them with your friends. And if you're feeling generous, pop us a 5-star rating on your favourite podcast platform. You can also go to www.raiseforall.com to see all the other things we're doing. Back to the episode. So we've been talking about how to create the stillness, how important the stillness is, how we want the stillness in that storm. Jacqui, how do we create stillness?
So I am not a big believer in magic wands and pills and hacks and fixes because I just think the things have to be done. There isn't a quick fix for things. Most things that are sustainable and make a difference do take effort. However, that said, the way in that I found to this was breath work. As a lot of people, I tried meditation, I dabbled with yoga on and off over the years, never really got that side of it. It was very much a physical practice for me. And I got into doing some breath work practice with a yoga teacher before I was diagnosed with cancer, actually, and going, oh, I like this, because they are techniques and you are counting and you're remembering how many rounds of something you're doing. And so therefore your mind is being drawn into this. And obviously the breath itself is the only thing in our autonomic nervous system, which is all the functions that happen automatically to keep us alive. The breath is the only thing that we have voluntary control over, because we can't change our heart rate and we can't change our blood pressure, and we can't change all the other things, the hormone levels. We can't do anything about that. But what we can do is change how we're breathing. And that is a portal into our nervous systems and into our bodies. So by doing the breathing, we can change what's going on within our nervous systems and take ourselves out of fight or flight or wherever we are. And we can take ourselves out of like the really static low state as well. But in doing the techniques, your mind is then being led by the breath, and you are not having to worry about is my mind empty? And your mind's never empty in meditation. That's never the point. But the breath work and using the techniques allows the mind to be, the attention to be taken and the awareness to be taken to something else. And in doing that, I started to go, oh, this is really cool. Well, I like this. So I really drummed into breath work. And in as little as 5 minutes a day, you can, if you regularly do it, start to make a difference in terms of how you're feeling, slowing things down, just your rate of breathing, slowing down the length, increasing the length of the breath, slowing down how you speak, just having awareness of whether you're even breathing at all or whether you're holding your breath. There's so much in there. Most people don't even breathe properly. And I had a real moment during my treatment, and I write about it in the book at length, about doing my radiotherapy, where we have to do loads of breath holding when you have radiotherapy for breast cancer. And there was a point where I was just lying there, and it was quite stressful, thinking, oh my God, that's what this has all been about. All this stuff I've been doing has brought me to this place where I can do this 25-second breath hold, I don't know how many times, and not freak out. So yeah, so 5 minutes a day of breathing techniques, and there's lots of places out there that you can access that. I actually set up a course that I taught during my treatment, actually, to teach people, because I wanted to take it away from yoga and put it into people, for people who don't think it's just woo-woo nonsense, and go, this is something that's really practical and do it, and let's just bring it into that. And there's a lot of people that knew me from my physio business who would see that as a natural extension of what I was doing. The extension of that is, as you allow the mind to be led by the breath, you can use the breath to then lead you into a real moment of stillness, focus and concentration, and using an arc of breath. And when you can do that and then begin to explore how you use your attention to gather your awareness and keep coming back to this sort of focal point of the breath, you can start to allow all the stuff that our mind wants to be distracted by, whether that's sounds, thoughts, emotions, worrying about what you're cooking for tea, all those other things. You can learn how to bring that into that point of stillness, and you can just start again. It's never about having an empty mind. That's not the point of meditation, and it's not really the point of stillness either. I was thinking about this yesterday as I was walking the dog, where I live by the river. And the river can be so different, and sometimes it can be like a raging torrent, and other times it can be so low. But sometimes you get this point where it appears to be completely still.
Yeah. But
it's only, like I was saying, it's only momentarily still, and at any point something could change that. And that's sort of what happens when we're doing meditation, is that we are creating that point, and then we're starting again as we get our attention becomes aware that our awareness is not back on the breath. And in very, very simple ways, we can create stillness literally in a second in a day, by just pausing and taking a breath before we do something. A lot of people know that if they're stressed or they're going to do something or do a presentation, everyone says, oh, breathe, and they sort of know that that's what they need to do. But with anything, we if you've practiced it, it's there when you need it. And people, the biggest sort of misnomer about breathing is, well, why do I need to do breath practice? I already breathe. And as a physio, I mean, I first learned to breathe, what breathing was, at 30 or whenever I went back to uni to do my physio degree, when we did the respiratory part of that, and going, what do you mean your belly's supposed to go out when you breathe in? Because I was a real sucker. And most people, when I teach my course, that's the thing, most people are like, oh, is that how you're supposed to breathe? And so to say, oh, well, I already know how to do it, I'll just pause and take a breath when I'm stressed. It's different, isn't it? You need to actually be breathing properly in the first place. And there's lots of other things out there. There's lots of, through various people, it's become quite trendy. And it can become quite performative. And obviously the breath and oxygen and how it affects the body can be used to improve performance in a sort of movement, sort of elite sports way, which isn't really where I come at it from. I come at it from the place of it creating a window into being able to actually see what's going on in your body and paying attention and just giving your body like these little moments of rest to recuperate, rather than thinking, well, I'll do that at the end of the day, or I'll rest tonight, or I'll rest at the weekend. And I think that's the biggest thing, is drip it through the day.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of thinking about it, because you're right. we do. I think we often treat rest as a reward. When I've done this, and this, and this, then I can rest. And what we don't realize is when you've done this, and this, you're often too wired to be able to rest because you're doing so much that you've really ramped your body up. So as you said, that drip feeding. I wanted to go back to just what you were saying about people saying, oh, well, I already breathe, so why do I need to learn? I mean, it's very much the same as food, isn't it? Well, I already eat, but actually learning how to eat well is as important for your body as learning how to breathe well, or vice versa. I wanted to also touch on a few things. So I'm a singer, so I done so much stuff around the diaphragm, and but I was horrified when I got long COVID and had occupational therapy, and they told me that I was breathing wrong. So I've been doing all these singing lessons with pupils and teaching them how to breathe, and then they're saying, oh, you don't breathe properly. I was like, oh dear. And it's interesting, and I think there are maybe different ways to breathe for different purposes. But the other place that I come from on it is because I have long COVID, I have air hunger. So the idea that I feel like I can't get enough breath in, so I focus a lot on breath, and actually that can make me as panicky as not focusing on breath. So being able to access that stillness alongside the breathing, I think, is very important for people as well. And I think that was one of the very scary things about COVID, was it really did affect people's breathing. And so to be in a place now where there are people like yourselves where breath work can become a safe place again, I think is incredibly important.
And there's something that we practice in meditation called determined stillness, which is where I think as I've developed this understanding of stillness not being a static thing, because determined is very much like an action-oriented piece. And what that is as you get to that point where you come into that point of concentration, it is not to move, to be completely still physically in your body, which in itself takes practice, because we are fidgeters. We're talking here and waving our, well, I'm waving my hands about you.
I'm wiggling my fingers, you just can't see.
But we're moving, we're twitching, we're scratching the back of our neck, we're arranging our shirt collar. And the determined stillness within meditation is this thing to make a conscious decision to not move a muscle, and the only thing that is moving is the breath, and obviously whichever bits of the body need to move with that. And again, back to my radiotherapy treatment, we hadn't practiced it quite in that way with my yoga teacher, but she'd done part of a practice where she'd said, resist the urge to fidget. If you've got an itch, try not to scratch it, just keep focused on your breath. And so I practiced it a few times in our sessions, and then I was doing my own practice on my own every day. And one of the things when you're having radiotherapy treatment for breast cancer, and I had bilateral breast cancer, so in both breasts, so I had a mastectomy and a lumpectomy, so I had to have both sides radiated, so it's quite a long treatment, relatively speaking. But they set you up, and you've got your hands up behind your head, and it is so intricate, the setup, because they need to radiate a very particular place. It takes them longer to set it up than it does for them to do the treatment. And then you're not allowed to move. Wow. And it's like, don't move. And the pressure, that's what I'm saying about, like you said, that thing of focusing on, when someone tells you not to look at something, that's all you can see, isn't it? If you don't, if you ever ride a bike and it's like your mountain bike, don't look at the rock, you'll hit the rock, and then you hit the rock. So and there was one or 2 days in, and I got this itch on the back of my neck, and they'd literally only just gone out of the room, and I'm thinking, okay, and you can't move, you can breathe, that's what you can do. And I just focused away and did the thing and kept thinking, and that was that whole, what if I'd never practiced that? My initial thing would be, all I can feel is this itch on the back of my neck, and I need to scratch it. And that's what the determined stillness is about. If you can bring stillness to the body, it will then bring stillness to the mind. And we talk about embodying things, and it's a term we use a lot in yoga. And again, it's a term I think a lot of people don't fully understand. And it's interesting, as a physio, it isn't a term I particularly use as a physio, even though we were doing it all the time, which is like, what are you actually feeling in your body, and thinking about where we feel emotion in our body and where certain things sit, how we're responding. Our body is telling us things all the time. And when we sort of tune into that wisdom that the body has, because the body's constantly trying to bring us into balance through a process called homeostasis. So, you know, things are changing all the time in our body. We're putting food in, the body needs to digest it. It's trying to come back to balance. Hormones go up, hormones go down. We get hot, we get cold. There's all these feedback loops within the body about bringing us back into balance. But it's a very fine balance. My husband gave me this lovely analogy the other day about, if you imagine you've got a bowl, and it can either be upside the right way round, and so you've got a ball in the bottom of it, and it'll just settle, won't it, nicely in the bottom of like a cup, because the forces on it will allow it to just settle there, which is sort of like that more static stillness, because there's not very much is going to actually make that move. Or you could turn it over, and there's a tiny little flat bit on the top of that upturned cup. So it's like a dome. If you're trying to balance the ball, if that is the stillness or balance on there, it doesn't take very much for it to want to roll off either side. So if you think of it like that's kind of what the body's doing all the time. And if we can come into that determined stillness and be in that place where that ball is delicately and carefully balanced, but not rigid, and we're able to allow those very tiny little changes, but keep coming back to that center point when we're meditating, the mind will follow, and then we don't then allow all these other distractions to be there, and we can keep coming back to that point. I hope that made sense. Kind of went off a bit of a tangent there, but that analogy, when my husband said that to me the other day, I went, oh my God, I love that. I'm pitching that.
Absolutely not important at all, and really quite trivial, but I did absolutely love the moment when I discovered that I could stop my feet from feeling ticklish by just getting into a bit more of a state of stillness and breathing, because there's nothing better than tickling somebody, and then when they go to tickle you back, it just not bothering you at all, even though they know you're ticklish. And it felt like a tremendous superpower.
Yes.
But realistically, is what you were talking about. It was that zone of, I'm just concentrating on my breathing, and actually those feelings that I would normally get, I'm not getting. And it was that itch in the back of your neck.
And so much of it is about being able to respond and not react.
Yes.
The external stimulus of the world causes us often to react, whether that's physically or emotionally, and if we can pause and then work out an appropriate response. And some of that is to do with the way our brain processes information, and that the emotional part of the brain, the messages get there sooner and it reacts, and it takes a little bit longer for it to get into our prefrontal cortex, which is sort of like the sort of rational reasoning part of the brain. And it's about being able to build those synaptic connections and strengthen those neural pathways so that we can get to there and just keep the emotional brain in holding pattern long enough that we can actually make rational decisions. And so much around breathwork, meditation, whether you're using journaling, creative processes, are about neuroplasticity and self-directed neuroplasticity, which is actually remodeling the way our brain works. We create these well-trodden paths that we, like tire tracks, and you'll just stay in the tire tracks. If you're walking up a country lane, it's harder, isn't it, to walk in the bit not in the track. So it takes time to build a new pathway, or get off this very, very well made groove that we're in, which is why I go back to my original comment that there aren't any quick fixes. Because to really make sustainable, lasting change, we have to do something enough and to feel the benefit of it enough to keep going. And a big part of the work that I do, although obviously my passion is around trying to share just like how much this has transformed the way I approach life day to day and those storms that come is the implementation of it, because you can teach all this stuff. Like you said, you could go on a retreat, you can do all these wonderful things and say this is wonderful, but if we're not doing it enough and regularly, we don't make any lasting change. So we talk a lot about routines and rituals and building habits, and how, you know, if you want to build a habit, you need to be able to make it easy and achievable, you know, really small. But also, for the way our brains are wired as human beings, is we want the reward, we want the satisfaction of doing the thing. And so often when we're trying to build good habits, whether that's losing weight or exercise, the actual reward is somewhat delayed, because not having the chocolate biscuit this morning, I'm not going to see the benefit of that until I've not had the chocolate biscuit for a month. Same with exercise, you know, going to the gym, you've got to go, or running or whatever. But with breath work and with meditation, to me, and this is why the 5-minute dose thing of breath work is the beauty of it, is you do get that instant gratification, because you instantly will feel better after you come out of it, and therefore you get that, and then over time you get the delayed reward of just feeling stiller, calmer, more in control, able to respond. And that's a big part of what I do, because, you know, I think it's Stephen Covey, isn't it, is to know and not to do is to not know at all. And we take in, there's so much content out there, we're absorbing stuff all the time, but what do we actually do with it? And I was really keen for anything that I did to have that sort of implementation element of it, because as a physio, the thing, I saw hundreds and hundreds of people. I ran a clinic for 13 years. I worked for other people before that and in the hospital. You could always tell the people that were doing the things that you were recommending that they do. And if I'd had £1 for every person that came through my clinic who said, oh, I didn't do the exercises that you gave me, I'd have been able to shut the thing down. You know what I mean? Because we're terrible, but we choose to make other things priorities, and we don't prioritize ourselves. And that's been my message, is that, you know, we have to make space to take care of ourselves, because you know, and obviously having something like cancer is such a wake-up call. And my huge desire was for people, you know, do we need to wait for something so dramatic to make changes? You know, it's very easy to think things won't happen to you, or I'll do it when, or I'll get there then, or when that's happened, it'll be better. And, you know, it's like, but you need to do it now, because none of us know what's coming. Oh my goodness, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, none of us know.
This has been fascinating, really interesting. And as I said, I want to encourage you personally about that stillness that I felt just in that, even the introduction to you, and the fact that you are, you know, the right person to come to when it comes to talking about stillness is lovely. We do a couple of features just at the end of our podcast. So the first one is that we always kind of set people a challenge or some kind of way to apply what we've talked about. So I think that you listening today, and if you're listening and you know that you've not put your well-being first, you know that you are one of those busy people, or that you're in the middle of a storm at the moment, where are you going to find that stillness? So are you going to reach out to Jacqui? Are you going to turn to your faith? Are you going to talk to somebody else about what is creating the turmoil inside? However you need to do it, you deserve to have that stillness now, not when you've finished all your jobs, not as a reward at the end of your to-do list, and not when something horrendous hits and causes the world to turn upside down. Now, Jacqui, have you got anything to add to that?
No, that's beautiful. That's yeah, you've summed that up. There is no time like the present, and the present is all that we have. And if you are the sort of person who likes to do, having the ability to do breath work and meditation in your arsenal of things that you can do, or your pick and mix of things you can do, is so powerful, because sometimes we can't always do. And you're experiencing this with your long COVID. I experienced it during my diagnosis went on for like 8 weeks because they kept finding other things, and then you're in the middle of chemo and you're like, oh my God, I can't even move. But I could breathe.
Yeah.
And I could, and having something else that's so simple and gentle that can make you feel better, rather than having very active things being the way that you stress relief. You know, like I say, I spent years with runners telling me that if they couldn't run, they had no way to get rid of their stress. But there are ways, and the beauty of pausing and breathing and just taking a few moments is, it's always within our grasp. You don't need anything to do it. You might need support to learn how to do it, and you might want to do it in community with other people, or you might want to have some kind of assistance, or there's lots of ways of prompting. But when you really need it in a moment, it's just there. It's always there, and it's always available to us.
Thank you. So the final bit of the podcast is that I always do a little on the spot poem. So just give me a minute. Take a breath in and breathe that breath out, and feel the stillness. It's all about you, and it's all within. It can surround you, and it can calm you. And it is as simple as breathing in and breathing out. And it is all about the stillness. There you go. I tried to be as calm as you were. I don't think I managed to.
And that was beautiful. That's given me goosebumps. I love that. I love that.
Thank you so much for bringing such a beautiful stillness into our podcast today. And we'll pop all the things about your books and obviously the breathwork classes and things that you do in the show notes. Was there anything else that you wanted to say before we finish?
Not at all. Just thank you for inviting me on here. It's been absolutely delightful. It's been lovely.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Jacqui.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
So calm. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's a lovely, great poem. Love it.
Thank you. Sometimes lots and lots of words come, and they just didn't today, and that's because they didn't need to be, did it? You don't want a stillness poem that's so busy wordy, make you think hot.
No, that's lovely. It's fab. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I love it's nice to have this different approach to the certain subject matters, aren't they, but coming at it through a very fine lens it's interesting how the conversation goes. And it's on my list of things to do, is do a podcast. I just haven't quite got around to it in amongst all the other things that I'm doing. I'm in the middle of an 7-week immersive writing course at the moment, which has been incredible, but hasn't left much space, and kind of made me go, I just want to write. I don't want to have to do like promotion on but doing podcasts and things it's just stuff's all there now. The stuff's all there now, and running, it's just letting people know it's there, isn't it? That's
yeah, absolutely. And you can repurpose stuff, and you know.
What's your business? So
it's called Raising Confidence, Inspiring Creativity, and I do it in lots of different ways. So over the last 10 years, I did story sessions where I wrote all the songs, and kind of worked with both the little ones and their parents. I've done youth work in schools. I write jingles, I write poems. I am doing a transition program from year 6 into year 7 for school kids. I do singing lessons. I do all kinds of things.
Cool.
But all designed to raise confidence and inspire creativity.
Yeah.
Funny then.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever I'm doing, that's what it's for. Yeah. Yeah, so it's all very confusing, but it's had to change so much over the years. So I used to deliver everything face to face, but I can't do that anymore. So it's all online now.
And you're Leeds, aren't you? You said in.
Yeah, well, I'm near White Rose Centre.
Okay.
I'm right in the middle of Leeds and Wakefield, right on the border.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you ever, I'm only being Lee, so if you ever wanted to meet up.
Oh, nice. That would be nice. Yeah. Where did you find me? Was it through Connect Wakefield?
Yes, I just put a thing out for saying I wanted to be a guest, and you and Sam and a few others, and did you on BB? I think that's where I found you.
Yeah.
But did you? And you responded to my thing about my Demon Charmers podcast, didn't you? I think it was you.
Demon Charmers.
So it's a few weeks ago now, and it's fallen off my radar because of this course. I'm pretty certain you responded when I said I wanted to get a group of 6 or 7 women together to do a podcast project. I'm sure you responded.
I might have responded about maybe doing a jingle for, I can't remember.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. That's what it was.
Yeah, because I've done lots of jingles for people like Danny Louise and Sam and Emily Kirk.
Yes. Well, I will get you to do a jingle when I eventually get my podcast done, but this other one I'm doing, and I do need to get on with it. But I mean, you're very welcome to be part of it if you wanted to be. It's a project with somebody else, so it's already part of their podcast, and he's looking for guest hosts. But that's talking the way he's done it before. I've been a guest on a couple of them. It's around mental health, but picking a topic. And then having the same people for a series, so like 5 or 6 people for like 4, 5 or 6 episodes.
Yeah. Talking
about particular topics around mental health. So he wrote a book which is aimed for kids. You might actually, with your work, find it. Because not that I'm trying to flog Simon's book for him, but actually for your work, I'll send you the link. So he's a sports psychologist, and he does a lot. I met him through a business group, but he lives near Harrogate, and his wife, I'd been working with him, he'd been doing some coaching just before I found I got cancer, and then worked with him. And then his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer about 6 months after me. So we've become quite good friends and know his wife quite well. But this was his little pet project, because he's written lots and lots and lots of business books.
Yeah.
And he's taken his sports psychology, and he does work with sports teams, but obviously taken it into a business context. And he wanted to write something for children. So he was writing this book, and he'd been rejected by editors, and everyone going, that's terrible and whatever. And eventually he got it done and written it. And it's got little lessons and things, but it's very much about children and mental health and things. But what he does is, if he sells so many copies, he donates them. With every so many copies that are bought, he then donates them to schools and things. But it's not a business venture per se. It's his little sort of project.
So, by the same token, have you heard the episode on anxiety? Because that's about an 11-year-old who's written her own book about anxiety. So Simon might also be interested in talking to her.
I'll direct him.
And her mum, Lisa Barry.
No, I mean, I'll direct him towards it. But this Demon Charmers podcast that he set up was, ideally he wants people to read the book and then talk about some of the issues in here. But it's, I have to confess, I've got about 6 books on the go at any one time. As you can see, I'm part way through it. There's a bookmark in it.
Don't worry, if I speak to him, I'll tell him.
Yes, but he, so when I did a live one at Leeds Rhinos a few weeks ago about adversity. I was guest on that with 2 or 3 other people. He did it as a charity event, and then he's asked if people wanted to, because he just wants, like I say, it's more about just getting more people talking around mental health issues.
Sounds brilliant.
And if people wanted to host it, and then if we record them, he's got some wizzo guy who can he said, you don't have to do anything, just record it Zoom or whatever, Riverside, send it, and then this guy will put it on his podcast. So I put a call out, and you did say about the jingle actually, saying, would anybody be interested in being on it? And I'm sort of looking for people with different backgrounds, really. So I didn't end up with, I've got a couple of people on there.
Yeah.
And then we can pick whatever topics we want. There's obviously ones he's already done. They've done imposter syndrome, perfectionism, but there's different ways of doing it. But you might.
I would I'd be interested in being a guest, because my mum had mental health issues throughout my whole life, so I really understand.
Yeah,
coming from it from lots.
Well, no, as I said, I don't particularly talk about it. My mum has had a huge mental breakdown, which is the thing I talked about, but I don't really talk about it publicly.
Yeah.
I'm
just gonna, just because we're now,
okay.
I'm gonna just
obviously sorry.
no.